Wednesday, September 18, 2024. This is the Arlington County Board of Equalization hearing. We have 6 cases on the agenda and there are 6 members present for a quorum. Mr. Hoffman is absent today. The first case on the agenda is RPC 340270063, 3535 South Ball Street. I assume, Mr. Slavoski, you're here on behalf of the accused.
Yes, I am.
Okay, all right, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about the property.
Awesome. Good morning. My name is Steven Silvasi, as Rosa had just said. This property is located at 3535 South Ball Street. It is a 378 unit apartment with 4,143 square foot of retail space built in 2007. So for analysis, we kind of just utilized actual gross potential income as reported on the calendar year end 2023 income statement submitted, as well as we utilized the actual other income we reported as well in the calendar year 2023 income statement or income I&E survey, excuse me. We utilized the vacancy rate as the same as the county, which is 6%. And then we utilized the expenses in $8,754 per unit as per the Arlington County guidelines. We felt it was appropriate for a cap rate adjustment of 40 basis points from 5.64% to 6.04% for the apartment portion of the property, which would, so given all of our adjustments we made, that would result, and the cap rate adjustment, that would result in a value of $128,650,800 with no cap rate adjustment and just utilizing kind of the county guidelines and actual gross potential income reported. The assessment, we calculated assessment, or the revised assessment, to be $137,701,060. So before, in the first level of appeal, the county had mistakenly forgot a point. So the original cap rate for the commercial portion was 5.64%, while in the county guidelines it should be 5.643%, which would just be a slight adjustment of $1,789,900 for the commercial space. But that's our argument.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Cheekas for the county, please.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, board members. Good morning, Zach. Again, we'll focus primarily upon the income stream. In looking at that, you can see in columns E1, E2, E3 our original assessment. When you compare that to the column F, the 2023 I&E that was received with the appeal packet, you can see we were extremely close top to bottom, within 1.5% of achievable gross potential, within 0.5% of effective gross, and within 1.4% of operating expenses, which led us to being within 1% of the NOI that was achieved. We saw NOI growth of over 2.3, almost 3% in 2021, 6% in 2022, and another 4% in 2023. We do believe that our original assessment is essentially spot on, again, only calling for 1% growth year over year after years of 2.5%, 6%, and 4% growth. As the agent for the appellant did note, we did correct the omission of the full thousandths place for the bid rate for National Landing. Thereby, we did call for revision in columns G1, G2, G3. Based upon the facts stated, we do believe that the revision should be confirmed at $155,262,700. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? None?
I have one.
Okay, Mr. Metzger.
I was just doing a little math. Let me write this down. This is for the department. Are you referring specifically to your test, your revision G1? You made a real good calculation in E1 on the operating expenses because you found that in F, in the I&E, that you were just a tad less than actual. I'm sorry, a tad more than actual. But then you kept that amount for OpEx in your revision. In other words, you didn't plan on any increase at all. I mean, we hear, 10% increases, which I don't think is valid, but you gave no increase whatsoever. What was your thinking on that?
It was essentially looking at the history of the property. We noted that OpEx dropped by about 1.5% in 2023. We followed that same math by not adjusting. We were within 1.4% year over year. So the revision, in a sense, isn't a revision of the operating statement. It's a revision
Right.
of the applying the correct bid rate.
Well, yeah, the bid rate, sure. 2023. Just quickly, OpEx 26. Oh, yeah, I mean, it's too close to call. That's just fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chikas, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, ma'am. So again, looking top to bottom, we're within 1.5% of every metric achieved. And again, this was some months before we received the 2023 I&E. Regardless, looking at the growth of the property, gross potential loan grew by over 7% in 2022, another almost 4% in 2023. Net operating income increased 6.5% in 2021, another 6% in 2022. 4.05% in 2023. We see no reason why this won't continue to 2024. We do believe that the county's revision of $155,262,700 should be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Sylvester, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Sure. Like I said before, we just utilized actual reported 2023 income as well as the county guidelines for vacancy and expenses in our argument. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. All right, it's just among the board. Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, I think this is about as good as the county, as good a job as I've seen the county do. I mean, it's very accurate, I think. Anyone disagree?
I was just taking the expenses and averaging, but yeah, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, Mr. Lawson.
Okay, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we confirm the county's assessment, revised assessment of $155,262,700.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second by Mr. Mendez. All in favor? Aye. Okay, it's unanimous. County's revised number of 155,700. Thank you. We have Mr. Chikas. We have Mr. Warren. Is Mr. Warren on the line?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep. Okay. Do you have a camera or no?
Is it not showing?
There.
It's on.
There you go. Oh, you're upside down. There you go.
Okay, next case is RPC 140450008. Start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Yeah, so as I had discussed yesterday after we concluded the hearings, we are in agreement with the county's revised recommended value of $230,963,100.
Oh, yeah.
And
Stuck out.
Mr. Chikas, any comments?
Yeah, ma'am. We were happy to accept that.
Okay. Any questions? Can we look to a motion? Okay. Yes, that being said, then I'll move to confirm or accept the county's reduced number, $230,963,100. Do I have a second? Mr. Matzkin, in favor?
No,
Okay, it's unanimous. County's revised number of 230,963,100 is confirmed. Please, do we have Mr. Steinhauser?
Thank you all. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Blake.
Good morning, everybody. I'll be presenting on behalf of Grant.
And who are you?
Here it is.
Emmanuel Lamadrid. Manny's good too.
And what's your last name?
La Madrid, Lamadrid.
Sorry. Oh, I don't. Have to check. Okay, hold on one second. This should be 070063444. Ms. Ruskin, do you know if this gentleman's,
I can confirm that he is, he can represent.
we have paperwork to confirm that?
Yeah, it's the very last page of the appeal, Ryan LLC and Mr. Gomez. Well, Emmanuel is a member of Ryan LLC.
Okay. All right, next case on the agenda then, RPC 070063444 at 2000 North Glebe. Mr. La Madrid, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Thank you. So the subject property is a 47-unit assisted living facility off of North Glebe Road. Much like our Bluemont Park case, it is a Sunrise community and had its first, it submitted its first I&E using the healthcare format, which again, we appreciate from the county as it's been able to capture a lot more of what's going on in the property. The property is, however, assessed using the cost approach, which we try to match in accordance to the county. The property has been struggling for years and had a negative NOI last year. Largely attributed to an increase in expenses as attributed to rising costs, inflation, and whatnot, kind of things that we spoke about in our last case with Sunrise. We're kind of seeing it the same way in this case. It is a 36-year-old property, which brings us to our main difference in our cost approach, which is the effective age. We do use an effective age of 30 years old. The property is in pretty average shape, but it is certainly wearing its years. Again, it is a 36-year-old property, so we felt that 30 years was definitely fair. And the reason why we also felt that it was fair was because it would capture some of the financial struggles that the property has been facing, posting a negative NOI this last year. Again, just hasn't quite been able to recover from a lot of the headwinds during COVID. And we felt that an adjustment to the effective age was certainly fair. But I believe that's all as it relates to this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ruskin for the county, please.
Thank you. Thank you, board. Okay, for this particular property, yes, property type, we use the cost approach. For this, there's only about 8 properties in the county that are healthcare facility, and we do collect income and expense statements for these properties. However, we don't have sufficient data at this time to warrant using the income approach, and that's why we value these on the cost approach. This property is being maintained based on permits and reviewing the appellant's submission, email submission, where the owner has stated their maintenance costs. They're maintaining the facility. And let's see, they've done some updating, small alterations, interior alterations. They've done some mechanical upkeep, electrical work, painting and carpeting. And by the way, I did inspect the interior and exterior of this property last year. That's the most recent date for interior inspection. Let's see. For 2023, they reported about 124,000 in repairs. And before that, they reported, the year before that, they reported about 135,000 in repairs. So the property is being updated. Now, I did put in the comments, there was an error in when this property was valued for January 1. I took the wrong number on the cost estimate and plugged that in. Instead of doing an own motion and correcting it, I skipped that step this year because the appeal was coming up pretty quickly, and I made the correction in the comments. So I'll read those corrections. The correct cost of improvements should be $2,766,200. You add that to the land value, the January 1, 2024 assessment should be $4,923,000. Okay, now in the cost estimate, I made the test cost estimate. I made a couple of changes. I switched from shape to perimeter of 415 linear feet. This is what Marshall and Swift prefers that you do. If you don't have access to that information, then you use shape. So I made that update, and that reduced the improvement value to $2,739,000. When you add that to the land, it gives you a new value, a new total value of $4,895,800. Now, the January 1 assessment right now is $4,892,500. So that it's a little less than what the correction would be, or the adjustment to the test cost estimate. I did want to make a comment that the agent stated that this is an older property and everything, and I looked over their cost estimate. They're using 34% depreciation, and I'm using 46% depreciation. So I'm using a higher depreciated rate. I recommend that the board confirm the January 1 assessment of $4,892,500. Thank you. I'm open for questions.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from the board? I just want to, Ms. Ruskin, because you were talking fast, I was writing something.
Sure.
You go back and tell me how many properties are like this in the county?
8. I believe
8.
there's 8.
And was your testimony that they're all, because you don't have enough income information, and they are all assessed based on cost approach?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, other questions, Mr. Lawson?
Yeah, this is for the owner. Recently, the GLUP, General Land Use Plan, was amended from single-family residential to allow a rezoning to RA 818. However, nothing's been filed. Is the owner going to pursue their addition plans or not, or do you know?
I'm afraid I don't know. My apologies.
Okay, got one for the county for Lori. Lori, this building is obsolete according to a lot of the testimony that occurred during the plan amendment. How do you bring the cost? How does that impact the cost approach when nobody would ever build something like this for this use.
So the property is being treated first of all, it's being treated equitably like the other healthcare facilities in the county. So they're all being treated the same using the cost approach, and we're using some heavy depreciation on them. So obviously, if you build a new healthcare facility, they're going to construct it in a different manner. Okay. These cost estimates are to reproduce the same functional inadequacies that are built into this property. So they're all treated the same way. And none of I want to say the Jefferson is probably your newest building. And I think that's a good 20 years old, maybe.
Yeah, the county hasn't had any new ones in, I think, 25
Correct.
years. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Metzger?
A question, excuse me, probably for the department and the appellant, whoever can help me out here. The appellant said that this is the effective age of this building is greater. It's an older building than the department thinks, 30 years versus 23 years old effective age. Whereas the department said, and therefore the value should be less than the department has pegged it. The department, on the other hand, said that we've depreciated the improvement by more, 40-some% versus 23% for the appellant. And therefore, and it turns out, therefore, that the valuation is higher than the appellant's. So I would think more depreciation would produce a lesser amount of money, valuation money, but it hasn't. So where does effective age come in on the depreciation or the valuation or something? Because maybe I'll try Mr. LaMadrid first. You say that it's an older effective building, but you have lesser depreciation. I can have an older building, lesser depreciation. That's as far as I can go.
All right. So we did our cost approach as best we could to match what the county is doing. We did change the effective rate. It looks like the effective age, I'm sorry. It looks like the biggest difference is coming from the unit cost. We do our approach as of, excuse me, 1/1/2024 and apply the what we feel is the adequate effective age of 30 years old. As far as the depreciation percentage, I'm not sure. We do use the same cost approach method of Marshall and Swift as the county, but I'm not sure why there's that discrepancy is happening there. Maybe,
Okay, so
maybe
Marshall and Swift. So your number comes from a building with effective age of 23 years old for Marshall and Swift, this type of building, this shape. And that's where you come up with your valuation that's just less than the department's. So the department, how do you have more depreciation but a higher valuation?
It comes down to when I'm completing the cost estimate, my cost estimate before depreciation is building cost new is $5,015,000. And then you're going to add the 46, well, I'm sorry, subtract the 46% depreciation. Okay. When you compare it to the agent's cost estimate, their cost new is $2,493,000. I'm sorry. I'm looking for their cost new. It's a little bit different format than what I'm used to. It looks like their cost new is $3,777,000. And then you subtract their 34% depreciation.
Okay, that's great. That explains it. So you got your new build value cost from two different sources, and that's why you got such disparate top line valuations?
We're both using Marshall and Swift. It's just his interpretation of how he's costing it using Marshall and Swift versus the county's interpretation of how we'd use Marshall and Swift to cost the property.
What does interpretation mean? The shape or the?
It's a variety. Let me go back to the test. It's a variety of things. It's the cost, it's the occupancy. We're using elderly assist, multi-residential. It's a variety of things. There's a lot of variables involved in the cost estimate, down to the finished basement, the heating, the type of exterior walls, the elevators, the sprinklers. There's a lot of variables involved.
And the appellant's using different assumptions on some of those variables, apparently.
It could be, yes. Excuse me, I will let him answer that. Sorry.
Yeah. I was just going to suggest that. Have you seen their variables, variables, Mr. LaMadrid? And because in this percentage-wise, this is a huge difference in a brand new building, proposed. Go ahead.
Correct. So as mentioned previously, we did try our best to replicate the county's original worksheet. It seems that we use a little bit of a lesser quality at 2.0 than the county uses at 3.0, but we do try to maintain pretty standard from there forward. I think another thing I noticed would be the basement. We have that as a semi-finished space, where the county has it as finished, if I'm not mistaken. But again, just like subtle differences like that. Perhaps like as the county uses the same, want to say, yeah, I believe that's where most of our discrepancies come from. Just I believe the quality.
I'm sorry, but you're on top of it. You see what they've done vis-a-vis what you've done. That's really what I wanted to know.
Yeah, gotcha.
Thanks a lot. Great. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Lori, this is for you. I understand how you changed the date of a office building and the date of a residential rental building. I think all of us understand that, improvements are made and they replace kitchens or floor, or whatever. And so there comes a time when enough improvements have been done such that you up the age. Here, though, you have a different situation, and you're in a heavily regulated industry. And the testimony that the owner of this property made during the plan amendment process was that they're suffering from two things. One is that their rooms themselves are obsolete and that they can't utilize modern technology and medical stuff in a lot of the rooms. And then the second thing he testified was that in order to be cost efficient, you need to have more rooms. So given that, I'm wondering if it makes sense to lower the age back to when it got built.
If I lower the age back to where it built, then I'm saying that the improvements are worthless. They're not worthless.
Well, they're close.
Good point.
Any other questions? Ms. Roskin, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Thank you. Once again, I wanted to make note that there was an error in the January 1 assessment, corrected it within this appeal with making some changes to the from shape to the linear footage. It reduced it to a couple thousand dollars less than what the January 1 original assessment is. We are using a higher depreciation. There is value to these improvements. It's not worth zero. This property is still functional. When I inspected it, it was in its great condition. If these improvements were worth zero, then I would suspect the county would say, hey, you can't have these people occupying this space. There is value to this property. It is not zero. We accounted for that in the depreciation. And we feel that the original January 1 assessment value of $4,892,500 is reasonable. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. La Madrid, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
That's good. Thank you. Just very quickly to wrap up, what we do feel that this building may be functional. It's as shown in the year in 2023 INE, it just isn't profitable right now, and feel that that should be considered. We do understand that the county is using the cost approach to value this property. Again, most of the repairs and maintenance that has been going on at the property has been more upkeep, not any major renovations, and has been done on a need basis. And we feel that the effective age of 30 years old is certainly fair to capture everything that's going on at the property. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Buff. All right, it's just among the members. Mr. Meskin.
I agree certainly with the department that what they've done to maintain it isn't valueless. There's value to it. And which leads me directly to the appellant's contention that, yeah, they agree. And it shouldn't be treated as a 36-year-old, but rather a 30-year-old building. And and to support that, the average of $130,000 or $50,000 of quote repairs isn't anything exciting other than making sure that the ceilings stay up and the floors don't buckle down. I think I'm on the side of the appellant and their rationale.
Yeah, I talked to the land use lawyer that did the approval of the GLUP amendment. And what the county is expecting is they're going to come in with a 4.1, and because they rezoned it to RA 818. And the what the lawyer told me is they're waiting a little bit longer for things to flush out due to the pandemic, because that really changed the way the housing for the elderly is happening right now. And but the building, the owner still intends to come in with a major, redo of this property. So I'm kind of with Ken. I think a reduction. The reason I was asking so many questions, I was trying to figure out how to justify it, I guess is the right word. And I think probably the age, because it is, I mean, they are using it and people are living there and so forth and so on, but they're not really making a profit. And so I think maybe the age is the way to justify it.
Ken spoke exactly what I had with that. It's a 36-year-old building. The appellant's not asking for a 36-year. They're not asking for a 1988 effective age. So I would be more on the side of the appellant for going with it for years. How much that affects value, I'm not be sure. That was their main argument they stated in the review.
Right, it's $200,000. I mean, it's not a ton of money,
That's exactly right.
But look at that, Mr. Yates.
I was looking at it's the improvements, I think, are more along the lines of maintenance to keep it at par, and it's not making money. I don't think that it's an improvement that's bettering it and bringing its effective age up that much. That's where I came out.
So you tend to agree with
Yes, yeah.
what's been said.
I think it's a maintenance issue more, just to try to get it there.
Keep it safe enough. Yeah.
I wasn't totally convinced that their argument was warranted to making a change. So I was okay with it.
I would add that there was a disagreement in the interpretation of the building, semi-finished, not finished. I would tend to go with the department's assessment of that kind of stuff.
Basement.
And therefore, yeah, the variables that Lori mentioned, I accept that. I mean, all things being equal, but I don't think it's equal because of the age issue.
Right. Somebody like to make a motion? I
You
think.
want to make it?
Yeah, I should make it. I move that we reduce the assessment to $4,650,000.
I'll second.
Motion and a second by Mr. Lawson, all in favor? Aye, opposed? Okay, it's 5-1. Mr. Penaranda, the assessment's reduced to the appellant's request of $4,650,000 even. Thank you both. Okay, we have Ms. Shuttlesworth, and Mr. Harmon.
Good morning.
Do we have Ms. Shuttlesworth?
Good morning.
And do you have a camera?
My camera is on.
Here you go.
Oh, it's on. Thank you. RPC 140511019 at 4420 Fairfax Drive. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, sir.
Yes, thank you. Madam Chairwoman, members of the board, Annetta, good morning. So 4420 Fairfax Drive, this is a property at Fairfax and Glebe. It's in Ballston, right next to the Ballston Metro station, just a block away. Currently, this property has on it a 1985 vintage office building that's about 58,000 square feet. This property does also have an approved site plan in place, and that is how the county has assessed it this year. The 2024 assessed value is an increase of 61% over the 2023 assessed value set by the board, despite the only change of the property in the interim being that the property sold for less than that 2023 value. This property sold in March of 2023 for $11,150,000 in an arm's length transaction that was widely marketed by the seller. Under Virginia law, as we're all aware, all assessments are to be at fair market value. Virginia law goes on to define fair market value as the price a property will bring when offered for sale by a seller who desires but is not obliged to sell and is bought by a buyer under no necessity of purchasing. In this case, the March 2023 sale fits the definition of fair market value under Virginia law, and as such, the assessment should be reduced to the sale price of $11,150,000. We provided the settlement statement for this sale in the appeal. This is shown on pages 68 through 71. Now, in the response, the county does not contest the sale. In fact, the county includes in their response the special warranty deed that was filed for this property that shows the sale price of $11,150,000. This is on page 30 of the appeal. The county also includes a CoStar printout showing this same sale price of $11,150,000. So the county does not contest the sale or the sale price. I'm not certain what the argument is on this property to justify the current assessment, which is nearly double that sale price. Now, I do want to mention briefly that under Virginia law, the county is required to disclose all factors considered in determining the value of the property at least 5 days prior to the hearing. Since the county has not provided any information or statements contesting the sale, of course, we're within the 5 days prior to the hearing, so no new information can be introduced that's not included in the appeal packet. So we have a fair market value sale that meets the definition of fair market value in Virginia, and we have an assessment at nearly double the sale price with no consideration given to the sale. To quote another appellant that we heard about a month ago, the sale is the sale is the sale. Now, in the county's response, they do mention leases in place at the property. This is true. The property is about 60% occupied. So if we were to do an income approach based on the leases in place, we use market rents based on the leases in place as well for the vacant office space. We apply the county's guideline vacancy rate of 28%. Even if we assume the county's cap rate, which we haven't accepted on any of these cases, but just for a temperature check, let's apply the county's guideline cap rate for offices of this age as well. That income approach gets you to a value of $10 million, which of course is below the sale price. Again, this is using the county's cap rate, which is based on the sale of the Microsoft building in Roslyn and adjusted for effective age. That's not reflective of a property that's over 41% vacant. Yet still, even accepting that, the income approach comes out lower than the sale price. That's not the value we're arguing for. We're just arguing for that sale price. However, a case could be made that the value should be $10 million. This may be a better reflection of the true fair market value of the property as of the date of value. After all, in order for the owner to take advantage of the site plan, they must get another extension to that site plan. The current site plan expires at the end of 2025. Yet as the county notes in their response, there is a lease with Arlington County that has no kick-out clause and runs through September of 2026. So there's no way this owner can develop the site plan as it exists with the leases in place. So under Virginia law, in order to value a property based on different uses, that use must be reasonably probable and immediate. Under the current expiration of the site plan, there's simply no way that they can redevelop it. Add to this that since the sale of the property has a year less term on the leases in place, and the market conditions for new apartment construction has deteriorated due to high construction costs, continued elevated interest rates, and the increase in supply the market has seen. So just to summarize that point, that the Supreme Court of Virginia has stated that any use to which the land is best adapted must be reasonably probable and immediate, which in this case does not necessarily hold true due to the presence of leases in place with no kick-out clauses and the strained economics of the market. So given the methods of valuing this property, we have appealed based on the highest and best use, which is questionable, but we're going with the site plan and we're valuing that based on the fair market value of the arm's length sale that occurred in 2023. This property did sell in 2023, an arm's length transaction. It was widely marketed for many, many months, I believe a couple of years, by the seller. The county does not dispute the sale in their review of the assessment and did not ask any questions regarding the sale. Again, by statute, the county is limited to arguing what they've provided 5 days prior to this hearing. There's no disputing the sale price. Again, just to reiterate, under Virginia law, fair market value is defined as the price a property would sell for between a buyer and a seller, neither under any necessity to sell or to buy. This is what happened in this case last year. As such, we respectfully request the assessment be reduced to that sale price, which was $11,150,000. Thank you.
Ms. Shuttlesworth for the county, please.
Yes, good morning, everyone. So this is again Arlington Financial Center, also known as Site Plan 331. It is located in the Boston neighborhood, less than half a mile away from the ramps for I-66. The board is well familiar with the site plan, as the appellants have been contesting the assessment since at least 2019. The site plan allows the construction of 237 residential units and and I believe 9,200 square feet of commercial space. The most recent amendment was approved in June 2021. The owners got an approval for the extension through December 31st, 2025. There is an existing office building on site, which is approximately 58,000 square feet. The main issue the appellants bring up in the BOE packet is the recent sale. So the property, as Mr. Harmon stated, sold in March 2023 for $11,150,000. It is currently assessed at $20,981,000. They are contesting the county's 2024 guidelines and our uniform rate of $86,000 per unit and $65 per square foot for the commercial space. The property was inspected on BOE review last year in August by our team member, Lori Roskind. She confirmed that the existing office was occupied by 4 tenants, one being the most recent, and that is the Arlington County Community High School. Out of 58,000 square feet of net leasable area, the high school occupies approximately 24,000 square feet. The leasing period started in January 2023, and it will expire in December 2026. There is no kick-out clause. From what I've learned by listening to the BOE hearing from the last year, there was an anticipation that the school would eventually relocate to the Penn place. That obviously has not happened. In this case, we do believe that the current lease in place with the Arlington County High School was a factor during negotiations between both parties. And this is because when the buyers entered into this contract with the seller, they were aware of this lease, and they did assume the risk of not being able to proceed with the construction until the lease expires. According to the principle of anticipation, the buyers made a purchase decision based on the anticipated benefit or the income the property will generate. Just last year, during the BOE hearing, at least one of the board members concluded that more than likely, the appellants will move forward with this project once the construction of the west entrance for Ballston Metro is finalized. The burdensome lease with the Arlington County will expire in 2026. As soon as the lease expires, the appellants can put the shovel on the ground and move forward with the project. They have already gone through the entitlement process, which we do believe adds value to the property. If the appellant chose to sell the property, they would factor this into the sales price. This is pretty much it. I'm open for questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Metzger.
First question for the appellant. The contribution for this new proposed west entrance to Metro, has that been paid by the owner, or is that just obligated at some later time?
That's obligated at a later time.
Okay, and you would, in the write-up on page 279, which the department wrote, but I'll still aim it at you first, says that it says it's requested review of the real estate assessment, believing the county should recognize the monetary contribution that the original site plan called for concerning Metro entrance. Recognizing, what does that mean? Should reduce the assessment by the amount obligated to this new entrance?
So, Mr. Matzkin, we did not put that in our appeal at anywhere, at any place. You can see our appeal on page 67, and we do not base our appeal in any way, shape, or form on that contribution.
Grant,
I don't know
okay,
why
good.
that got transferred. We're contesting it based on the sale.
Thank you.
You answered it. That's just fine. Okay, so the other part is, nothing's really changed, and this is for the department. Nothing's changed from this year to last. The site plan's the site plan, and that's how you review it and assess it, evaluate. So how, and as I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, that some of the site plan valuations, either residential units or commercial space or office space or something, is less valued this year than last year for all site plans. They're the same or less. Isn't that correct? This is a tee up to my real question.
So to the best of my knowledge, we apply the same rate uniformly across the board, which
this year and last year.
I'm
not talking about different properties. I'm talking about this year and last year for
this year and last year.
Okay, good. All right. I remembered something, for instance, retail going down to $60, but that's fine. So then how did the valuation go up 54% from 23 to 2024?
The board.
Because the board
ordered it.
The board granted reduction last year.
No, I see it. Question answered. Thank you.
That's why the increase is above the average.
Yep. Thank you. It was here. I'm sorry.
Any other questions? All right. Mr. Mendez.
So the property originally got the approval for the site plan, or it was amended in 2006. Will the property be valued on the site plan, until the site plan is executed, or is there a certain amount of income? Like, let's say the building generates a lot of income. Will the way that the county values the property switch in the future? I'm just wondering for other properties, not necessarily this one.
So I assume this question is for me. So we are yet to decide how we're going to value this property for 2025, and whatever action is recommended, it has to be approved by the supervisors. So I'm not able to
so by default,
at this time what methodology will be applied to 2025 assessment.
Okay, thank you.
And it was amended again in 2021.
Right.
Okay. All right, Ms. Shuttlesworth, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, so again, for the purpose of equalization, we applied our 2024 guidelines for all approved site planning, including the subject. Our guidelines have not changed. However, they will be revisited for the tax year 2025. This is an approved site plan. They have gotten through the entitlements. They requested for extension, which was granted. We do not believe that the recent sale was a valid sale due to the lease in place with the Arlington County Community High School. The board reduced the assessment last year, however, not all the way to the sales price. With that being said, we asked the board to confirm the subject's 2024 assessment at $20,981,000. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, thank you. The buyer and the seller did consider every aspect of this property when they arrived at the sale price of $11,150,000. Both parties were clearly aware of that lease. It was being built out for Arlington County. It wasn't a hidden factor that one party knew about, the other didn't. All factors were considered. They came up to an agreed upon negotiated price, $11,150,000. That's what it closed at. It was widely marketed. It fits the definition of fair market value under Virginia law. That's the requested value. You can see in our write-up on page 67, we do not mention proffers or community benefits anywhere in there. I don't know how that got mistranscribed on the county's response, but the sale price is the sale price is the sale price. This is also, there was another site plan that sold in 2023. That property also sold for much less than the county's guideline rates. Site plans are selling for lower than the county's guidelines rates, as we see in this case. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, it's just among the board now. Okay, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, this reminds me of the case, I'm sure it reminds you of that. With the site plan that had the sale as well, and that the only difference is that sale occurred early this year. This sale actually occurred last year.
In the assessment.
So,
Right. The problem I have with it is, as Helen just argued, everybody knew all of the terms. Everybody knew what was in there, what the lease was, but there's a site plan. And I would agree with the appellant if there wasn't a site plan. The sales price is the sales price, but there is a site plan. If they don't want it, they could abandon it. I mean, obviously you're going to use it for something. And I think the fact that they can't build it out now or do what they want was factored into the reduced sales price.
The site plan expires. At this point, they have to go back to amend it again. It expires into 25.
Right. This is, I'm sorry, what month are we in?
Well,
September of 2024, and this is.
So, yeah, now they're gonna
January.
right, they're gonna spend more money to continue to,
Right, but they knew that when they purchased
and
it.
that's why it got the purchase value.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I
That's why
agree.
it was discounted.
Wasn't that the appellant's point of view, that there was some hurdles here and that's why it's at this level versus the
Right, but it
greater
doesn't
site
mean
plan
that there's
level?
not value to the site plan that's already started.
Say that again, please.
It doesn't mean that there's not value to the site plan that's already been
Of
started.
course there is.
There's value, but nobody's gonna let a site plan expire. And,
Yeah, no amendment.
it costs you between $1.5 million and $2.5 million on a site plan for a building of this magnitude. And so nobody's gonna let it expire. You're gonna amend it.
But amending doesn't cost $1 million plus, does it?
No,
I mean, it's.
no, but this site plan is unbuildable or have been built. And so they're gonna have to amend it. So, to extend the site plan costs the filing fee. We would like to extend the site plan another 3 years.
It's easy.
You file it. But if you're gonna go in and renegotiate what are called community benefits, every bit of FAR above what exists there now is a charge by the county. And so you have to negotiate your benefit package,
Wasn't that this contribution to the new metro
Yeah.
entrance? They've done it.
which is unfeasible right now.
What's unfeasible? The entrance to Metro or?
No, the amount of money makes it unbuildable. It costs too much. The site plan conditions are too expensive. And so eventually they're going to go in and amend the site plan and they're going to renegotiate their community benefits. That's what's going to happen in the future.
That's then and that's not now, yeah.
You know, the assessment will change, but to me, there's too many unknowns of whether it can get amended out and extended, whether it's buildable. I mean, to me, the bottom line is the site plan is on it. I'm fine with the county's assessment until it gets resolved. Because again, we're like close because it's September of 2024, but this is really for January of 2024. So that means it was 2 years out, not a year and a couple of months.
But the way the county's valuing site plans is just factually erroneous. The value is not what the county
That's why we're
says.
doing it across the board. If that's,
But we just didn't do that across the board on a recent case. I forget which one, but we recently went with
Adjusted the,
right.
To the
because it
sales
was a
price.
Sale, because it was a sale within the period of time. There was enough votes to do it, but
and
you know,
this,
like I said, I mean, if the site plan methodology is incorrect, that's a bigger
what
issue than.
the court case that talked about sales says that a recent sale of arm's length shall be given something like due consideration. I forget what exactly it says, and the court says, well, that doesn't mean, okay, it sold for $1,150,000. We've considered it and we choose to ignore it. You have to give it some consideration. So I don't think the county can say, well, that's irrelevant because we have the way we value site plans. I think
To me, I think they can, because I think that's two different things. I think when you have something that doesn't have a site plan, I think you should consider it. And you're bound to consider it, but you also are bound to consider it that what was the motivation of the seller? Did the seller have a reason to want to discount it? Is it because of the other factors that they took less for it because they knew that they were going to have to put money out to extend these things? You know, but there's two different things between something that has a site plan and something that doesn't.
I don't agree. I mean,
That's the beauty of a vote. You don't have to agree with me.
yeah.
Greg would know the answer to this. Does anybody else have the notes from last year and why we reduced it?
We reduced it based on the offer that I had, 13 million inside. Mary and I did not agree with it, so the vote was pretty much still 4-2.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. I think the site plan is what the site plan is with any project that we've seen throughout the years. Every time that the site plan is in place.
I hear you, but the county's wrong. They're just factually wrong.
What's the facts
The
there?
value is not what the county says it is.
site plan.
You asked the question. They're valuing it the same last year as this year when the office market's gone into the greatest recession in 20 years.
Fortunately, this is mostly residential and not office.
Yeah.
I mean, it's some retail.
But the residential, I mean, we heard the Tom Schultz case. And you can't get a loan for the residential. The banks are required much more of an investment.
Down payment.
The costs have
It's
exploded.
the market risk of the business. I mean,
But that's how fair market price gets determined, is by the risk.
The 11 million sets the value of that site plan. That's what was sold for.
to me, I don't see that. I see that was discounted to have to deal with the future
With the
issues.
county and the,
You know, again, if there was not a site plan on it, I would say you're hard pressed to assess it for more than what they paid for it.
You're saying that the current owner, the buyer, is constrained by the site plan and that affected downward the value, the amount they're willing to pay.
Well, let me ask you this, Mary. The fact that you have an income producing property does add some value. Like if it's raw ground and you buy it, you have to carry the property. Here you do have some income. How about a compromise of going to what we did last year?
No, because last year it was based on the sale,
It was based on an offer that wasn't
Yeah.
the same.
the offer. I mean, to me, I look at this and that's again, kind of like where we got to yesterday. It's a slippery slope saying, oh, on this site plan, then we'll go back and go, oh, because we don't feel good about it. We'll go back and say, oh, let's look at part of the income. Make a decision, because then the next one, then we might as well throw out the whole equalization of how we assess site plans.
But that's not our fault. That's the county ignoring the reality of the fact that site plans are worthless.
If it didn't have a sale, I would not argue with the site plan value. But it has a sale that valued what this property is worth in the site plan.
But do we know what the motivation of the seller was in selling it? Do we know what the discounted amount of that market value was for the fact that we have a site plan that's going to come up in 2025? We don't know that.
Last year, it was lower based on an offer, but then we have a sale, a bona fide sale for it. So that's.
Right, but a bona fide sale that somebody went into, in my mind, knowing what these constraints are, knowing what limitations are on the property. And like I said, they haven't opted since they purchased it to say, hey, this site plan doesn't work. It's never going to work. Let's abandon it. Because then we go back to the income.
But nobody would ever abandon it. It's,
Well, but that's,
well,
plans do get abandoned.
why don't I throw out a motion and see if it passes? I move that we, is that okay to throw out a motion?
Well, I think it's risky. I don't agree with you. I'm trying to preserve your right here. Until you know, because if you don't have enough votes, it's going to revert to the county.
Right.
So
It's up
just-
to you.
That's exactly right. That's just what I'm, well, the fair market, this really is, the constraints on this property were well known, and this is what the market valued it at, given those constraints. I don't remember if last year, whether I was here to vote, because you said it was 4-2, 6 people, not 7, and I might have been 7. I'm shocked that I would support an offer to buy the 13 million plus.
You actually second.
Huh? That shocks me. I trust you more than I trust me. Good, I'm glad you brought it up. I don't know, yeah.
I mean, we had another property that was, I'm not similar, but they also requested for the assessment to be reduced to what it was before when they were getting the income. Just, if you remember, it was, I think, assessed previously for $7.5 million. They had the site plan approved, and then the value went up to more than $50 million. And they said, no, we're still getting some income, so we should be assessed on the income and do anything. But the site plan was in place.
Absolutely. Site plan.
That I agree with. But the income on this property is below market. It's just,
And why is that?
I think it's because of the high school, it's the county's done.
I'm just saying, I mean,
that's why I'm not looking at the income. I think the income would bring it down in itself. But I'm still stuck on the value was set based on the sale.
And we did, what makes me happier this year than last year's sessions was that I was convinced that there are exceptions to the rule. And from time to time, like a chronic, in an office building, chronic 60% vacancy. Okay, we ought to really take a whack at that as an example. And I voted that way. And in this way too, I think this is an exception because this is a sale in the assessment period.
Yeah, I would support a reduction closer to the sales price, maybe last year's amount. And just like when an appellant says, if this lease will expire next year or this year, we tell them we don't care what they're going to do in the future. We're just looking at what is going on
Okay.
now.
Without a doubt.
So with that, the site plan expires at the end of next year and they have a lease through 2026. So it's not likely they're going to use that site plan anyway. So again, I would just go back to either the sale or.
okay, I believe you've got votes.
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we reduce the assessment to last year's assessed value, $13,600,000.
I second that.
Okay, motion second by Mr. Metzger, all in favor? Right, opposed? It's 4-2 without myself. Mr. Pananda. Okay, the assessments, excuse me. The assessment's reduced to $13,600,000.
Thank you, board. Thank you, Jordan.
Okay, Mr. Peralta,
Yes, good morning.
you got your camera on? There we go. Oh, we don't have your person. There we go. Okay, next case is RPC 1401618 at 4501 Fairfax Drive. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes on this property.
Yes, thank you. So 4501 Fairfax, this is a 196,000 square foot office building, also at Fairfax and Glebe in Ballston. It was built in 2001 and was 47% vacant as of the date of value. At this property, the fitness center is in the garage level and the conference center is on the second floor, which leaves nearly 92,000 square feet of vacant space at the property, which equates to 47% of total NLA vacant as of the date of value. This property over the past 3 years has averaged 56% vacancy. The issues on appeal are the cap rate, the operating expenses, and the DFL. For the cap rate, the DREA has imputed a cap rate that makes no adjustment for the high vacancy nature of this property. The county's cap rate, as we've heard numerous times, is based on the sale of the Microsoft building in Roslyn. That building was 92% occupied, with Microsoft occupying 180,000 square feet at the time of sale. Compare that to the subject property, which is 47% vacant as of the date of value, simply not comparable to a property that's 8% vacant, with a credit tenant occupying the majority of the building. As such, an adjustment to the cap rate to reflect the high vacancy nature of this property is necessary. Now, to provide some further context, if this property were, just a few miles away in Fairfax County, there would be an automatic 125 basis point adjustment added to the cap rate to account for the high vacancy at this property. Additionally, the county, when they were applying their cap rates based on that Microsoft building sale, did not even fully apply the expert report that showed that cap rate. They didn't even apply that report's dictates across the board. So the very first paragraph, as I've shown previously, of that report states that the county must do 3 things in order for those conclusions to be utilized. First, the report states that the tax rate must be loaded. The county does do this. Second, the report states that the real estate tax reimbursement revenue must be excluded. The county does not do this. The third step the report states is that real estate tax expenses should be excluded, which the county does. So the county told us this is the report they based their cap rates on for this property, yet they misapplied the report by only applying 2 of the 3 required steps to be able to use that report. Now we can also look at a 2023 sale that occurred just down the street from this property, less than a couple blocks away. 4601 Fairfax sold in August of 2023 for $102 per square foot at a cap rate of around 20%. That sale comp was better occupied than this property. The sale comp had 60% occupancy at the time of sale versus the subject, which is only just above 50%. Yet the subject is assessed at 2.5 times the amount of the better situated sale. A large part of this disconnect is due to the assessment using a cap rate that is in no way reflective of the market value for this high vacancy property. For the operating expenses, the county on their revised column has imputed OpEx at about the same rate as the property incurred in 2023. Now, this is problematic for a couple of reasons. First, the assessment adds income to the property to treat it as if it's 72% leased instead of the actual 53% leased. This is why the NOI on the assessment is over $4.1 million versus the actual NOI reported at the property for 2023 of only $2.3 million. It's because the county has added income to the vacant space that the property will not earn in 2024. The county has not made that same adjustment for expenses. They've treated expenses as if it's a 53% occupied property, yet they've treated income as if it's 72% occupied. So, with operating expenses, it's not enough to simply look at what did it incur in 2023 when it was 53% occupied. We need to gross that up in the same manner that the county has done for income. As it stands, the current assessment assumes operating expenses will decrease by nearly $200,000 from 2023 to 2024. The county test assumes OpEx will be about the same in 2023, even with greater occupancy assumed by both of those values. Second, the county's test expenses do not account for any natural growth in the cost of goods and services that's always present in the market. The county's test assumes January 2024 expenses will be exactly the same as January 2023. February 2024 expenses will be exactly the same as February 2023, and so on. And this is despite the disconnect between income being grossed up to reflect a higher occupancy and operating expenses not being grossed up to reflect the higher occupancy. Finally, the assessment and the test DFL do not adequately capture the cost associated with leasing up the excess vacancy at the property. Now, this is primarily due to the one-year lease-up period that the county's applied. Looking at the assessment history at this property, we see that the county told us in 2021 that the property would reach stabilized occupancy in 2021. It did not. 2022, the county again told us it will reach stabilized occupancy in 2022. It did not. Same situation in 2023. The county told us on the assessment it will reach stabilized occupancy in 2023. It did not. Now we hear the same story on the assessment. It's going to reach stabilized occupancy this year. That's unlikely given the history of the high vacancy at the property and the negative net absorption that's been present in the county since the pandemic 4 years ago. For this reason, we've applied a 2-year lease-up period to reflect the time that it will take to absorb the excess vacancy at this property. So to summarize, the cap rate at this property is based on the 92% occupied Microsoft building in Roslyn when that sold in early 2022. No adjustment has been made for the chronic high vacancy at this property. If this property were in Fairfax County, an automatic 125 basis point adjustment would be added to the cap rate to account for that high vacancy. Operating expenses are based on 53% occupancy, whereas income's based on 72% occupancy. So there's a disconnect there. And then the DFL, we've been hearing for years that this property will lease up in this year, and it has not. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. For this property, I was doing some calculations because I had earlier emailed Mr. Harmon, and it's in my comments section about that fitness center and conference center. So when doing this case, I didn't have that information today. He mentioned that the vacant square footage is 92,000, not 95,114, as the INE stated in the 2023 INE, and in his pro forma where they state that same amount, 95,114. So when making that calculation, it really only affects mainly just the below the line adjustment. I mean, there's a few items that I can speak to regarding the gross potential income, but just doing the below the line deduction alone, that's about 5,260 square feet difference in allocated excess vacancy below the line. And what that amounts to is another $733,300 that should be added to my test column, the final value there. So the final value there should be 49,595,600. But because this amount, the original test and this new amount that I just calculated based on the information provided today is higher than the original assessment, I'll just continue on with my 8 minutes regarding this property. When looking at the gross potential of the property, we did find that the average leases in the property for leases in place were $44.10. Our test calculates it at $40 a square feet. The original assessment is at $42. With the test at $40 a square feet, we are looking at the gross potential of in excess of $4.10. That equates to $377 for 446 less than what is reported in the 2023 INE. With respect to the vacant office, we're valuing the vacant office in our test at $38. We do see that the new leases that were signed in the property average $42.68. And that's a difference of $4.68, which amounts to a value of less than $445,000, $133,000. So when you combine the differences in gross potential income that the county is presenting as far as in the test column with the reduction of those per square foot rates, that total amounts to $822,600. And that's just off the rate alone. By virtue of our guidelines, we do apply an additional $2,146,100 to the rates there. And that's deducting what potential income of this property is by almost $3 million, 2.968700 to be exact. When looking at again the vacancy, although we had that discrepancy presented this morning, the vacancy would remain at 28%. But then looking further down in expenses, our original assessment had expenses higher than what was previously shown in the last 3 years, from 2020 to 2022. And then most recently in 2023, we did see a bigger spike in expenses. We did account for that in our test column, so we adjusted up to slightly higher what they reported. In particular, we were 10% higher in our original assessment, about $43,225 than what was reported in 2022. And then in our reconstruction, the average for the past 4 years, we're up about 231,757. So on average, the expenses that I calculated over the past 4 years is about 1.6, 1.7 at best. Again, we were in our original assessment at that average, so to speak. And then on the retest, we were higher, 231,800 higher than what, the average is for this property in the last 4 years. Furthermore, when we're looking at the overall net operating income of the property, we do feel that the original assessment is in line with what the reconstructed NOI is showing. And again, we're including that vacant square footage that wasn't accounted for in column E, and we're accounting for in E1. So we're in line with respect to the net operating income of that property. And finally, when we're looking at the overall effect of what our guidelines have done to this property, the original 2024 assessment represents a 14% decrease from last year's assessment. Now that's equating to about $7.7 million in reduction. And in addition, we're looking at projecting for this property, we do see that leases have been signed in the last in 2023 and in 2024. To give you a summary of the two, in 2023, about 24,763 square feet was signed in the building. And if we use the nominal rate, or the rate at $37 or $38 is what the appellant is stating as what they see that this property can achieve, that equates to about a $916,000 addition in income to this property for 2023 leases alone. In 2024, there was 13,146 square feet leased in this property. And I noted that in my rent roll analysis that you'll see in page 6 of 170. And that 13,146 square feet equates to $486,400 using that same rate that the appellant uses. So at a total 1.4 million total increase in income just on the new leases that were signed. So going back to my summary page, we're looking at this property and we do feel that the original assessment is supported and we're open for questions. Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you both. Questions from board members? Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, hey, Rob. One of the points that Jordan made was that you can't lease up in 1 year. And so they did 2 years below the line on their column G2. How come the county hasn't gone to that?
We've always maintained our stance where it's an annual assessment. And so we value the difference from year to year. Given this subject property alone, you see that the changes that with the new leases in place, and a lot of those new leases weren't accounted for in this property. And so to project the property on a 2-year basis is not giving, let's say we give a 2-year credit on a property and a lease up, that 2 years is already given to the property. We can't take it back in the following year if they lease up 100%. So
Sure.
I think it's a fair assessment of how we value it year over year.
Let me ask Jordan a quick question. Rob clarified one of my questions that the vacancy is not the over 50%. Jordan, the vacant property or the vacant space, is any of it leased and vacant, or is it all truly vacant?
As of January 1st, the vacancy reported on the rent roll is what was vacant. As far as future leases, I'll have to check on that. Let me see, Rob, was a lot of those 2023 leases are all reported on the rent roll. So that was, and Rob did ask about these and we did reply with all the details. It's IBFD, Thayer Mahan, Franchise Information, Omega Wealth Management, FU Associates, and Carruthers Partners or Properties. Those are all included on the rent roll. So those were all accounted for. So what Rob's referencing is 2024 leases, I believe.
Jordan, what's the physical state of the vacant space?
We did inspect this property last year. I believe a lot of it was shell condition. I can check my notes and have that for you in just a moment.
Maybe Rob knows.
The physical condition of the vacant space?
Yeah. Your notes show that, or do you have that information?
I could check. But to answer your earlier question, again, I noted that for the 2024 leases, about 13,146 have been leased on the property for 2024. I only see one indicated on the rent roll for a 2024 lease.
Yeah, and that's appropriate.
Or he was researching.
Go ahead. Mr. Harmon, do you have an answer?
I do not. I'm still looking, but if I could, I'd like to address the lease up period as well, Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, no, that's already been addressed. Mr. Metzger.
It's probably a mix of shell and just abandoned, and it's normal. No question, 2 questions for the appellant. First one is columns G1, G2. Those were constructed after the property assessment was submitted to the building owner, right? It's consequent. It's a part of your appeal.
No, that's incorrect, Mr. Metzger. Mr. Peralta has added those. Those are from prior year's appeals. So those were not the 2022 one, column G, that was submitted in 2022. Column G1 was submitted in 2023. So Mr. Peralta's gone through the archives and pulled this data out and added it. So the only one that was created after the assessment was received by the owner is column G2.
Well, then okay, then I'll change my follow-up question. Column G is pro forma for 2022. It's different than column C, operating year 2022. One clear difference is that G shows the value of vacant office space, proposed value. but I was really boring in on operating expenses. So what's the difference between C and G?
So this property was appealed in 2022, 2023, and again this year. When it was appealed in 2022, that's what Mr. Peralta's provided in column G. So that's from a 2-year-old appeal, based on information available in 2022. Column G1 is based on information in 2023 at the beginning of, as of January 1, 2023. So really those have no relevance to the January 1, 2024 appeal value.
No, what I was, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
So I'll continue. So when we appealed it for the January 1, 2022 assessment, that's column G, you can see that the vacancy at the property as of January 1, 2022 was 56%. So that would be the why expenses are higher on the appeal value, is to get expenses to reflect a stabilized occupancy. That's something we do on every appeal. Is if you're going to impute income as if it's stabilized, you need to impute operating expenses as if it's stabilized as well.
Yeah, but these are the department's numbers, G1, G2.
No, they're
No,
the
they're the
numbers
appellants.
Appellant gave in those specific years. Okay.
Yes, so column G is based on column B information. So the 2022 appeal is based on 2021 data. Column G1 is 2023's appeal value. That's based on 2022 data. Really, they have no relevance. That you know,
Okay.
I would defer to the
Yeah,
county for
I've got
that.
two 2023s,
thank
two
you.
2022s. I
Yeah.
don't know which one to go by.
Don't, just dismiss them.
Dismiss them.
Get rid of them.
It's
G2.
All right.
Yeah, they're,
just look at the Gs.
No, just look at G2.
roll line through G and G1 and they don't exist.
It's what they presented in previous years that Rob put in.
No, what I'm trying to do is get a trend for operating expenses. Because the contention is that the department doesn't bump them up enough to account for such a high vacancy. And so I'm trying to say, well, the vacancies. Okay, great.
Solve that problem.
Good deal. All right.
Okay, other questions? No? Okay, Mr. Peralta, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Yes, thank you. Again, this 2024 assessment is a 14% decrease, 7.7 million from last year. The material difference in this case was presented today by Mr. Harmon. 92,000 square feet is vacant on the property if you exclude the fitness center, conference center square feet. In addition to that, again, I'd like to point out that another 700, sorry, where is my number? 773,300 should be added when you take a look at the below the line adjustment. So that figure in my test should be 49,595,600. But again, it supports the original value. The overall NOIs are supported in the previous year's history of this property. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Yes, thank you. So Mr. Peralta hangs his hat on the decrease from year over year. Well, in 2023, this property was assessed at $300 a foot. We know that that is not market value. When we look at sales, he did bring in 2024 leases. It's only fair to look at 2024 sales. 4075 Fairfax, that was a better building, newer, more prominently located. It sold for $170 a foot. The current assessment on this property is $260 a foot. Where is the disconnect? A large part of it's the cap rate. This property has been over 50% vacant over the past 4 years. Mr. Peralta says, oh, with 2024 leases, it goes to 38% vacant. Therefore, it's a fantastic property. 38% vacancy is not good. It's been 50% vacant over the past 4 years. It's still, even as of today, 40% vacant. The assessment grows NOI by nearly $2 million to account for occupancy that's not at the property, yet no adjustments made to the operating expenses to reflect that same adjustment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. All right, it's just among the board. All right, Ken, let's get you squared away on the
Good.
expenses.
Thank you.
All right, so if you're looking at your chart, so you look at column A. So for 2020,
2020.
So you see operating expenses 1.5. 2021, 1.7. 2022, 1.5. So based on only having that information, the county guesstimated in their assessment, it went to 1.7. You follow me?
Yep.
Okay, so now they've provided the I&E. And so they reconstructed it as the same as what they did it, that it was actually 1.926.
Right.
So now under the test, the county went and adjusted for that and moved it up to 1931. So the expenses are covered, other than the appellant is arguing that, oh, we want 2.1.
But isn't the appellant reporting their actual expenses, but they want for evaluation purposes to plus that
G2
up?
is a pro forma.
Yeah,
Operating E is the operating year is 1.926.
G2.
That's what they're asking for.
G2, 2.156?
Yeah.
I misheard you.
That's right.
Yeah.
But based on,
That's your conclusion.
no, it's not my conclusion, that's the fact. That's,
No, where are you headed to? I mean,
no, so, I mean, to me, I look at this and think, okay, Rob projected for it at 1.7, but, given the information now he had 2023, he was a little bit low, so we corrected it in the test.
Sure.
So to me, the expenses are a non-issue.
I think it's cap rate.
Right, but
Okay, well, no, I mean, the department said we did plus it up, we did account for that
Yeah.
large. And the appellant said yes, but not enough. And so I want to know what the trend was here. What was the real operating expenses historically versus the plussed up to account for?
1517, 15.
Those are the real, because this G stuff is not,
G stuff is their projections from
yeah.
years ago.
yeah, that's all it was,
Rob should-
projection.
Yeah,
Okay,
they shouldn't be in there.
I always thought that. Okay, that's item one, all right.
Okay, so
So-
then issue
Everyone's talking
two,
about
I would
cap
say, was the 2-year lease up, which Ms.
Yeah.
Gorman has been arguing for a 2-year lease up, I believe, for 15 years. And the argument has always been from the county side, we assess every year, we address that, so I don't think that's an issue.
I agree.
The bottom line on this is, as Mr. Lawson said, yeah, we feel that it warrants.
Yeah, I'll share what I did. I took the test column and I added the 0.5 to the cap rate. And then I adjusted the below the line per Rob, noting the error. I ended up at 46,360. So what I kind of wanted to ask the rest of you. I had a little trouble understanding what exactly the vacancy is. I think it's 47%. Is that?
That's what he said.
That's what he said, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think,
Which is
we before I've done it at 50, given the historic trend, does it make sense to bump it up 0.5 in this case?
Or below the line.
No, for the
No,
cap
for
rate.
The cap itself.
Yeah, so I ended up 46,360 if you do that.
Well, you added 50 basis points because it's a traditionally high vacancy rate,
Vacancy.
traditionally,
Yeah.
historically.
See, last year we knocked it down 2 million, little over 2 million as well. So I'll see.
I'm okay with the current assessment as well. I was just comparing column B and G2. The EGI, the appellant's numbers are higher on the EGI, so I moved down to the expenses. And the average of the last 2020 through 2023, I guess 4 years would be $8 and $8.70 a square foot. County used $9.25, so I was okay with that. And then, of course, it's down 14%. So with all that considered, I'd stick with the assessment.
Where was that, Jim?
We have a moment. And
Briefly.
In the last case, I said, I finally accept exceptions. And the example that I gave best for that, this last case even, was traditionally historically high vacancy rate. I think this qualifies. And I'm with Barnes. I just rounded it up to 8 cap, but he made it 8 point whatever, 50 basis points. So I came out with a lower number than Barnes did. So I support Barnes' number because this is an exception, because this is historically high vacancy. That's it.
Unfortunately, you don't
Well,
have
I'm out on it.
So I'm going to move to confirm.
But this is democracy.
500. Mr. Mendez, second, all in favor? Aye, opposed. And that is without. It's 4-2, and that's without. Orange. And county's confirmed at 48,714,500. Okay, and the final case on the agenda is RPC 1601810 at 1919 North Lynn Street. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes on this property.
Yes, thank you. So this property is a 635,000 square foot office building in Roslyn. As of the date of value, it's fully occupied by the CEB. Now, the issues on appeal are the operating expenses and again, the cap rate. Looking at the county's test on page 3 of the appeal, we see the 4-year operating history of the property. Now, I will note on this one, those are columns A, B, C, and E. Operating expenses were much greater each of the past 2 most recent years, 2022 and 2023, than what the assessment has assumed. In 2022, operating expenses were $5.9 million. In 2023, they were $6.6 million. The assessment assumes operating expenses will decrease for 2024 to only $5.2 million. This property has not achieved this level of operating expenses since 2021. It is not likely the property will decrease operating expenses by 20% in 2024 as the assessment assumes. The assessment assumes operating expenses of only $8.25 per square foot, which is not what any neighboring property has achieved at stabilized occupancy. Not only does this rate of operating expenses assumed by the assessment ignore the actual expenses at the property, but it's much lower than what market expenses in the neighborhood are. Now, under Virginia law, actual operating expenses must be considered and not ignored or given token consideration, as has happened here. If the county only gives actual operating expenses token considerations, again, as has occurred in this case, then the presumption of correctness enjoyed by the assessment is overcome, and the burden shifts to the county to prove why their level of operating expenses are appropriate. In this case, the actual operating expenses were at best given only token consideration. As such, the burden shifts to the county to prove why operating expenses will decrease over 20% in 2024 from 2023 levels. Now, this property is also about a block away from a sale comp that was under contract in 2023. 1201 Wilson is a very comparable property to the subject. Both properties were fully occupied as of the date of value. 1201 Wilson is 11 years newer and at a more prominent location. 1201 Wilson sold for $588 per square foot at a reported cap rate of 8.12%. That compares with the assessment for the subject property, which is $669 per square foot and a cap rate of only 7.48%. So there's nearly a $100 difference between the sale comp less than 2 blocks away and the subject. This difference is largely due to the assessment using a cap rate that is not reflective of the market for this type of property, as indicated by the 2023 sale of the comp nearby. And I'll also mention that 8.12% is an unloaded rate. The current unloaded cap rate for this property is 6.247. So nearly 200 basis points difference from the sale comp that occurred just a block or 2 away. Our proposed value in column G on the county's test page values this property nearly the same as the sale comp at 1201 Wilson. Our proposed value is $551 per square foot. Now, looking at the assessment history of this property, we see that the 2024 assessment is right at the 2022 assessment level. This is despite market sales in both 2022 and 2023 supporting lower values in the market for office properties in Arlington County. In 2022, the assessment was $426.9 million. The current assessment, $426 million. In 2023, the assessment actually increased by 7% from 2022. Then this year, the assessment just went back to the 2022 level. So the decrease from 23 to 24 is really just correcting that 23 assessment to go back to the 2022 level. Again, this makes no account of the lower market sales that have transacted from 2022 and 2023. Now, looking at the properties, I assume the county is going to argue that NOI at the property has been above their assessed NOI. This is due to the vacancy rate, the uniform vacancy rate that by law must be applied. Now we see on property after property after property that has higher vacancy, they get dinged with a higher assessment because the assessment only imputes up to a 28% vacancy rate. We saw that on the last property. The last property imputed NOI at $1.8 million above actual. This one, the property benefits from the vacancy rate. Since it is fully occupied, it benefits. That's the other side of the uniformity coin with vacancy and collection. Now, to try to claw some of that back, the county's adjusted operating expenses back to their 2021 levels. This, of course, ignores Virginia law that states actual operating expenses must be considered. So given, at best, token consideration that was given to the actual operating expenses at the property and the cap rate that's nearly 200 basis points below the sale count that's less than 2 blocks away, we respectfully request the assessment be reduced as set forth in the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
Thank you. This property, Waterview Tower, located in Roslyn, it's got panoramic views of Georgetown, DC. You can see for miles, from that vantage point. This property has been leased for the past 16 years by one single tenant, CEB. And because such, I mean, you'll see that this building has been stabilized, and you'll see the history of the property in which we were able to capture the values and be somewhat accurate with respect to the assessment year over year. And that's why you don't see the many changes that you would see with a property that has, some leases expiring and so forth. And so when you're looking at this property, this is a quality tenant. It's been in the property for 16 years. They have another 4 years to go. Expires in January 31, 2028. And so when you look at the original assessment, yes, we were low originally with the expenses, but we were also low with respect to the income as well. And it's not just the vacancy that we allot, the 8%. If you compare our original assessment to the agent's pro forma or even the reported income of the property in 2023, the original GPI is $2.8 million, $100 less than what was reported, and then 1,357,600 less than what the appellant is stating in their pro forma for the gross potential income. So the difference in expenses that was originally used in 2024 assessment compared to the increase that was reported in 2023, that's a difference of, I believe, 1.3 million, 1,345,100. And that's sort of a wash when you look at, what we used as our original starting point for our gross potential income. So really, if you take out the 8%, that is really not reality in this property. And we're equating almost $2.8 million in vacancy, where this property is 100% occupied for the last 16 years with an additional 4 years to go. If you just take that out of the equation, even though it's a huge reduction for a property that's 100% occupied, you're looking at the two remaining variables of the office income component and then the expenses. Those two really wash each other out if you use the comparison I did with the overall GPI of the property. So with respect to, looking at the overall NOI, in the last 3 years alone, or 4 years, our original GPI or our original NOI is eclipsed by that income, 1.5 million when you compare our original assessment to 2022, and then 3.9 million when you compare our original assessment to 2023's reported NOI. So, and then 2.5 million. So when we did the reconstruction, it's really like a test for this property when you look at the reconstruction, because the only variables we changed is the vacancy, which we allotted 2.8 million, where they're only reporting 311,000 for the property concessions and rent loss. So, and then we captured exactly what they reported in the 2023 INE as far as expenses concerned. So when you look at the bottom line, you know, no matter how you get there, we're right in line with, you know, what the appellant is saying is the NOI, you know, slightly higher, maybe $200,000 higher, but really cap rate issue, you know, earlier we had a case that where it was like 47% vacant. This property is 100% occupied. So if there was any shift in, you know, cap rate in the other direction, this would be the property. But, you know, we maintain that our cap rates are supported based on the information we've provided, the resources we've researched, and we maintain that we're within these the parameters that were given to us and within our research. So our cap rate is supported in that sense. So when we're looking at this property, we do think that the original assessment is well supported, and we're open for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? Matskin?
I have two questions for the department. First one, very quick, column G, who put that pro forma together?
The appellant.
Okay. Whereas the last case, the pro formas that I stumbled all over were put together by you.
Yeah, well, it wasn't put together by me. It was submitted in those calendar years for the reviews. And the reason I did that was I didn't speak to it then, but I could take, you know, just a short time to do so if you want.
It's okay, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you
Okay.
for trying. Second question is, it was well established in the last couple of weeks that properties that have a much, as an example, a much lower vacancy rate than the guideline, when doing a test or reconstruction, the income goes up a bit to offset the unrealistically low deduction for vacancy, and vice versa. It's much higher than the vacancy. The department is much more favorable in reducing or shaving off some expected and in a test expected income. You didn't do that in this case. We talked about it overtly several times in the last couple of weeks, that you make adjustments. But in this case, you didn't do that in column E1. Why is that?
I believe you're speaking to a different property type. I think apartments have that sort of methodology with their 8% vacancy. With respect to office, you'll see what the reported income is versus, you know, what we originally had, and there was the differences I pointed out there.
Maybe that's where I stumbled before. Thanks. Nobody brought that up. That's obvious in retrospect to me. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Peralta, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Yes, I think this case is, you know, this is one of the cases that where you can see all the data points in a stabilized property. You see that the income has steadily increased due to the, you know, increases in the lease agreements, the 2.5%, 3% that we've always spoken to. And then we also see that the differences from year to year in expenses have not a profound effect from year to year. You see this property is stabilized. It's at $8 a square foot since 2020, and it hasn't really increased until the most recent year. And now, you know, just because it's blipped this year, we'd have to look at the trend. But, you know, even doing so, you'll see that, you know, the overall NOI is supported based on the reconstruction and even the original INE. So we do ask that the board confirm this case. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, thank you. So, we look at the model says this value. We have to look outside the model sometimes when we have market sales that counteract the model, that say that the model is wrong. In this instance, we have a sale comp from late 2023 that's less than a couple of blocks away from this property. The assessment for this property is over $100 per square foot higher than that sale comp. So we can, maneuver within the model all we want and say this is the value. But in the real world, we look at sale comps and we look at the sale comps to test the model. We see that the model is not captured the market value. With this property, you can turn to page 40 and you'll see the actual reporting history of the property over the past 4 years stabilized for the uniform vacancy rate. That 4-year NOI is less than $31 million. It's $1 million lower than what the assessments used. OpEx the past 2 years have been much higher than what the county assessed it at.
Okay.
Again, all right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, it's just among the board. It's going to be a long time from now to the end of October on hearing cases. So normally wouldn't say this, but I'm going to just say this now. Mr. Harmon likes to pontificate about what our job is and what the county's job is, and that they must look at expenses and, we have to take certain things into consideration. In this case, nowhere in the statute does it say that you end up with an NOI lower than what's been reported just because of ranges or, one particular year. In this case, Ken, I think you're confused on column E1 is not a test column for the county. That's where they reconstructed the operating one. So there was not a test done on this. And there wasn't a test done because even if you look at what the expenses were, the argument, I don't even know why we're even arguing about this. Even if you would have adjusted for it, you would have then.
It would have been even higher. No, I didn't ask it for that reason.
No, but I'm saying to the appellant. So from a standpoint of all of the discussion that we had about that, you must do this, you must do that. They're at the right number. I mean, when you look at what Rob did with only having 20, the assessment looked really good. Then when he got 2023, it's fine. And nowhere, what he's got is actually lower than the 4 years and actually almost right in line with what the appellant is arguing. I just think it's a long-winded thing over. I think the county is fine.
She's too nice to get the news job.
Yeah, sometimes there's a case you shouldn't file and this is it, because next year I think it's gonna go up.
It will.
Yeah.
Well, this is stabilized and this is very stable and they've reduced by 7%, which is not marginal. No, I agree with you.
It's under assessed.
And I would just respond though to the appellant's appeal that, well, there's a comparable building and the fair market price is very much required to be considered. But to me, if the building itself is sold, then fair market value really comes in. But a comparable building, one comparable building, not so much. So that just supports my first statement that this is, and your statement and your
Well,
statement.
this is coupon flipping.
This is what?
Coupon flipping.
Oh, Johnny's too young to know what you're talking about.
It's a stable building that increases in rent year after year. And the value that they have right now, it's lower than 2019.
Yeah, this is on a sale.
Exactly.
No, and the appellant said 350 million.
Yeah, I didn't want to go there.
It's absurd.
Well, no, again, they're tying it to one comparable sale. And
He's a smart man, and I think knows better. However, that being said, I'm going to move to confirm the county at 426, 10,700. Second. Mr. Yates is a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it is unanimous. The county's confirmed at 426,010,700.
Thank you all.
The agenda. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all.
Okay. Anybody have any other business? Okay, we will stand adjourned at 10:55. Reconvene next Tuesday morning, September 24th, 9 a.m. virtual for everyone. Thank you.